Okay, welcome back. It's been a while, a long of time. Um, Sorry, I suppose. So, one video game that I spend an insane amount of time playing, and I want to talk about it a little bit, is League of Legends. It's a pretty old game at this point. It was released back then in 2009. It's not quite as popular now as it used to be, but it's still going quite strong. I actually started playing it in around high school. It was around 2012-ish. Basically started playing it because of my friends, so the social aspect of it was a huge part of the fun. However, I've also spent countless hours in solo play and used to be very addicted to it, to be honest. It's incredible how addicted I was to this. Like, I would spend, like playing it long into the night till like 3 in the morning and ridiculous amounts of time like that. Um, and then at one point, I just got fed up with it because it is sort of repetitive and just uninstalled it. And there's other frustrations to it as well. I mean, especially you can imagine that gaming schedule that you stay awake until 3 in the morning is not something that is very sustainable. However, I have recently found myself playing it again, but mostly because of nostalgia reason. I don't stay up until 3 in the morning anymore. So just to give you a simple introduction, if you don't know what it is, it's a so-called MOBA game. It follows the MOBA model. It's not the inventor of the MOBA model, but it was one of the early adopters. MOBA basically means that there's two teams. On each side, there is one center that you must defend, or you must destroy the enemy center. Every team has 5 players. I suppose the number can depend. But they need to work together in order to defeat the enemy center. So that's the goal. The center here is called Nexus, but it could be called anything. There's also towers in between that you have to defend and destroy the enemy towers. There's basically 3 paths that lead to the enemy base, and on those paths, the so-called minions will be spawned, and they will proceed towards the enemy base in order to help you destroy the nexus. So you will help your minions and defeat the enemy minions to destroy the enemy nexus. What you have is the so-called champion. There's a lot of champions that a player can control, and with those champions, they have unique abilities, and you can then buy items with money that you earn by defeating the enemy. And all of this makes the simple game model actually quite complex, especially because there's so many of them. Um, over the years, the so-called meta has developed. The concept of a meta is kind of interesting. It's basically unwritten rules that the players follow, simply because following those rules make for the strongest team. So the meta is, for example, in League of Legends, to simplify it, the meta will tell you what positions you will take. So on the bottom lane, they will always be the so-called AD character, so a guy who has some sort of a ranged attack, and he's going to have some sort of a support character like heal or utility, like a character that can grab the enemy to help you get the kill, for example. While other lanes, they will have their own certain stuff that they usually will have to follow. It's interesting because these are not written rules. You know, like the developers of the game didn't really make this up. It just sort of formed by itself because it makes for the strongest game. Now, the players will have to follow these rules in order to win. Now, you can also not follow it on purpose, and that can actually be even more powerful than following it, but you have to know what you're doing, or sometimes it's just luck, especially in lower levels. Sometimes the players are not able to react to non-conventional play, and so it goes like that. But most of the time, you just have to follow the meta, especially in like average skill level. The pool of the champions, as I said, is very large. It's extremely diverse, so you can find the champion that suits you in the playstyle and the theme. So, for example, like there's a lot of stuff. Like there's a character who follows a Western type film. There's references to popular movies, like a character that references Alien versus Predator, or you have something more general, like a policewoman. You can have like a more generic robot. Generic, I mean, something that doesn't necessarily follow anything. It's pretty original. You can have stuff like comic book villains that follow, comic books, for example. So if you're a fan of comic books, you'll be able to relate here. There's even a samurai guy inspired by Akira Kurosawa's films, so you can't really ask for more. There's also sort of a plot line going on here. each of these insane pool of characters have their own plotline, their backstory, and there's a fictional universe with a story going on. There's everything there. Everything has sort of a reason behind it. There's other fictional kingdoms and universes that are antagonistic toward against each other. Every character has a backstory and a lore. I remember back then I was quite into it. They released quite a lot of additional lore in the forms of forum posts, but I feel that they kind of dropped the ball on the lore aspect. It didn't really go anywhere, and the new characters introduced might not fit into the lore all that well. You know, the gameplay definitely has priority in front of the story element here. Of course, one very important thing about the game is that it's a free-to-play game. The main source of revenue is actually skins that only mostly serves for aesthetic purposes. I gotta say that these skins are quite a lot of fun. Some of them are like epic looking, pretty cool. Maybe they could be references to popular culture. Some could be very fan servicey, giving you, selling sex appeal. But it's only to look good, so it doesn't actually have much of an effect on the game. Maybe you can intimidate the enemy. If you have a rare skin, he might think that you're really good, but it's not really, so it's not a play-to-win game at all. All gamers have equal chances, so even if you're just a poor kid who doesn't even have a credit card like I used to be, you have the same chances as pretty much anyone. It's all about skill. So that's generally a good thing. However, one big downside to it, especially when it was very popular, is that there's a lot of children playing here. And because of that, the quality, like a mind of a child is different than a mind of an adult. He's more reactive, more emotional, he gets pissed off. You can't really communicate through audio, there's only chat. But, these undeveloped minds can show pretty strongly in chat, so it can be quite frustrating because of it, especially with lower stages. There's really going to be small kids who probably can't even read, so you can't communicate with them. It can't be helped, so talking about frustration, all the game mechanics and everything aside, this societal aspect of the game is, in my opinion, kind of the most fascinating part so far. So mostly here I'll be talking about some solo queue experiences. Of course, it's different if you go with your own team, then it's completely different dynamics. Solo queue is different because you're with complete stranger. It's a team game, you have to play with those complete strangers, so it's kind of anarchistic. All the players will need to oblige these unwritten meta rules of the game. They will need to work together in order to win. All the teammates are completely random. They're sort of supposed to be kind of like your skill level, but not really. Sometimes there can be strong differences in skill level as well. So only information that you have about these other real people is the fictional username that they have. So that's all. That's the entire fate hint of their personality behind the keyboard. Only communication is through text, and obviously it's impossible to have a quite high quality discourse this way because you're playing, you need to focus on the game, you can't be typing. So League of Legends is, and especially in the past, it was very famous for its toxic players. Now, thankfully, it's gotten a little bit better, but still, it's a team game, so you will need to work together with your teammates in order to win. You're only as strong as your weakest link. Especially if you're going against a more solid team. You genuinely will need to work with everyone, and if somebody is not cooperating, if he's not ignoring you, just minding his own business, maybe ignoring the game altogether, or maybe even dying on purpose, you are going to lose. It can't be helped. Like, you can be as good as you want to be, but like the enemy, if they work together as a team, you're just going to lose. Now, maybe it can be different if it's a lower skill game, and maybe the enemy team also has a player that's very bad as well, so you can't give up. It can be surprising how many times you can pick yourselves up, but especially if it's a more high, if it's a higher skill game, you really do need to have all of your teammates on your side, because everyone can have a bad day or something that bugs them, irritates them. Maybe there can be just internet connection problems. It happens. Maybe somebody will come to visit you without telling you, and you will have to quit your game. You never know, like anything can happen. So it's pretty easy to find someone who will drop the game for whatever the reason. It's important to stay calm, supportive to the other players. Some people will just immediately blame other people for their own faults because of the mask of anonymity here will really amplify these very unconscious human emotions. Kindness can help a lot, you'd be surprised. A lot can be done with just being supportive, but you also have to realize that a game can be unwinnable just because your teammates will act like children. Even if it's a perfectly winnable scenario, sometimes just because they will decide to drop it or argue, you will lose the game because of it, and it can't be helped. And it goes both ways. Just as you can have a horrible team, the enemy can have a horrible team as well. So chances here are 50-50. And actually, if you are a solid player, the chances are going to be in your favor because you're always going to be the guy who is not going to be toxic and stuff. But nobody is perfect, so it can't be helped. So, the enemy can always have problems within their own ranks, and that can also be a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun to play as a team who is solid against a team who is obviously arguing amongst each other. There's a huge gamble element here to it as well. You never know who you're going to play with. It's completely random. It's interesting to see how Riot Games has dealt with that in the past. A lot has been done by the so-called report system. So if somebody is misbehaving for whatever reason, any player can report them, and then the report will get reviewed by someone, and they can get punished. So that can be an account can be blocked temporarily or even permanently, so this can be quite seriously, especially if you invested real money into the skins. You're going to not want to get banned your account, of course. It's very natural. It's not a perfect system, but it in fact has improved behavior in the past. However, the most genius part is that they introduced positive discipline as well. They have the so-called honor system, which allows you to give positive reward to the player who you enjoyed playing with. Honestly, I wish that positive discipline was introduced outside of video games as well. Like, this virtual world shows us that it can work. So it would be pretty cool if instead of just giving traffic fines for speeding, you could also get a reward. That would be pretty cool. Now, you could even finance that from the fines by the reckless drivers, and you can have, I don't know, like a requisition of wealth maybe going on. Okay, but that aside, League of Legends shows that positive discipline can work, and it can be more satisfying. It feels better to get a reward for being good than, getting punishment for not doing good. That aside, looking at the chaos within your team can be frustrating, but also extremely interesting at the same time if you just step back, analyze it, and not let it frustrate you. Especially, it's pretty cool to see how players who tend to be the most uncooperative and, who will be the first one to type mean stuff or just be idiots, they will be the ones who will suck the most as well, so that's interesting as well. It's fascinating how fast a bad player will blame some other teammate for dying. The frustration can also be a game mechanic as well. It is possible to poke at the unity of enemy team with very carefully thought out remarks. So being hidden behind the keyboard like that can bring out some very interesting part of human nature that playing in real life you would usually conceal. Well, if you think about it, also in sports, a lot of these very negative human parts come out, so I guess it just can't be helped. To be honest, it's gotten a lot better now. Riot has genuinely done a good job with its system, and maybe also because League of Legends isn't the hottest game in town anyway, and anymore, so most of the kids are just playing Fortnite right now. In the last years, I spent playing this game like any other games very compulsively. I would play a lot until just the frustration would be so large that I would uninstall and do something more productive with my life. I still like to play League of Legends once in a while. I think I found a much healthier balance now with it. I usually just play a few games a week, completely casual. unlike countless hours as a kid, unfortunately. Although, if I'm, if I look back at it, it was a bit of a love-hate feeling about the game. So sometimes it would be a lot of fun, sometimes very frustrating. I would just uninstall, like I'm tired with this game forever, no more, and then I would come back. So it's interesting. But on the other side, a fun game can be just as satisfying as the bad one is frustrating. So another thing that I would like to comment is that Riot has added a potentially dangerous element to the game. Now players can earn random loot boxes that unlock champion skins and skills and whatever. But they can also be bought with real money, so there's a gambling element here now. So this is a very dangerous element that's been present in the gaming industry. The gaming industry has gotten very greedy in the past years. First it was DLC, and then it was loot boxes, unfortunately. It's very dangerous because it's a gambling element and it's a video game. Children are here. Normally, children are not allowed to gamble, but in video games there's a loophole. So children actually have access to gambling in video games, which is pretty bad. Like, it's just fucked up. That shouldn't be allowed at all. So I strongly urge any game developers and players to keep away from these gambling elements, especially if there's real money involved. It's pretty dangerous. I don't want to be all negative about it. It is actually pretty cool that Riot has allowed us to earn skins without paying real money now. Before that, skins were only with real money. Now you can actually earn them, so that is a cool thing. One thing that maybe needs to be mentioned is the game is updated constantly, partially for balancing reasons. Downside is that because there's so many diverse champions in this game, balance will always be impossible. This game will never be balanced. It can't be, because they're just adding more and more characters all the time. Riot is always trying to balance it, but it doesn't really work all that well. There's an annoying trend. There's always a couple of champions that are consistently more overpowered, and they will be usually present in almost every single game, while some other champions that can be pretty cool can actually be a rarity because they're underpowered. I have some personal grievances here. For example, there used to be a champion called Greaves. He was a cowboy guy with a huge double barrel guy. I used to play him quite a lot back in the days, but he was reworked and completely changed. But he's not viable now anymore, and he's completely different, so I can't enjoy the game like it used to be. And you're just stuck to playing the modern day version. You can't go back to 5 years and play the old game like it was, with the champions they used to be like. So eventually, the game will slowly evolve completely. It will become something completely different, or it will be discontinued and never be playable in its original form. Although, not to be negative, it genuinely does look better in general with the updates. I'm just kind of bumped up about a couple of those reworks that I don't enjoy personally. Overall, I have pleasant memories of the game, despite all the countless frustrations you also get out of it. It's also fun times. I hope you enjoyed this rant about it. It's interesting to have a reflection after so long time.